And because it didn't exist, we said that we had to create an education that train young people to this very complex future that is heading towards us, and give them the skills to figure out how to navigate through turbulence.
Welcome to Nordic Metamodern. My name is Lene Rachel Andersen. I have invited a very prominent Dane this time, Uffe Elbæk. Welcome, Uffe.
Thank you. Thank you.
Uffe is one of the contemporary Danes who have a lot of international outreach and reach. And so Uffe has started a very unique education. He's also started a political party. The education is the Kaospilots in Aarhus, which is the second largest city in Denmark. And the alternative is the political party. And you have been in parliament for, or at least the party has been there for 6, 7, 8 years by now, I think. So Uffe, why don't you tell us who you are and a little bit about your background, and then we'll dig into what it is that you're doing and why I've invited you here today.
Yes, and thank you for inviting me. Actually, I'm in a very interesting place in my life right now because we have an upcoming election here in Denmark just in a few weeks. I think the Prime Minister will call for election. And I've decided not to run for my seat. So this is actually, in a way, not the end station, because I think that a lot of interesting things will happen after that. But I'm leaving the Danish Parliament after nearly 20 years as an elected politician. First in Aarhus, which is the second city in Denmark. And since 2011, I've been member of the Danish Parliament. But I don't see myself as a traditional politician. Before I went into politics, I was a culture entrepreneur and has started a youth organization called the Frontrunners in Aarhus. And after that, I founded, together with some, in my mind, brilliant people, the entrepreneurial education. They're called the Kaospilots. I've also been the CEO of the World Out Games, which is an international global LGBT organization and event, which took place here in Copenhagen in 2009. On top of all of that, I've been member of the City Council in Aarhus. I've been Minister for Culture. I've started a new political green party here in Denmark, so I've been around. So I think I've done my shit, to say it very honest, and I'm looking forward to my new chapter as just me.
Which is probably going to be a rather exciting chapter as well, for what I know about you. The reason why so I've invited you very much because I've tended to disagree with a lot of the stuff that you have been involved in and that you have started. I've been very sort of doubting about whether it would work or not, and including the political party, the alternative. And so we'll get into that in a moment. But what I would like to do first is say how I relate to the title Nordic Metamodern and the reason why I invited you, because the Nordic countries have a lot of attention from the rest of the globe. And you've also gotten a lot of attention from the rest of the globe with both the Kaospilots and the alternative. I meet people from many places who ask me about, so this alternative, what do you think of it, Lene? And I'm like, I don't really know, because I think it's great, but I also have these questions about it. So there's a lot of good stuff in our history, and that's the Nordic part, because we did well in the Nordic countries for the past 150, 200 years. But then there's the metamodern part, the future part, and we're in a transition to something new that we don't know what it's going to be like, and we better shape it in a good way so it becomes a good future. And you are one of the people who have a lot of visions for the future and have actually managed to bring these visions into life and create the Frontrunners, yes, also that, the Kaospilots, and a political party that has inspired people in other parts of the world. So I think you really, match the title of and the intentions with this video channel And I also decided to call this episode Rethinking Education and Politics in Denmark, because you've done both things. So that is why I would like to invite you. But I would also like, and that's to go back a little bit further back in your history, because one of the things that I only realized about you recently is that you actually grew up in one of these folk high schools, of which I have written so much. Not necessarily the folk high school where you grew up, but this whole folk high school concept in Denmark that has shaped our country, and that kind of opened a door for me to understanding where you're coming from. So maybe you could share a little bit of that history with us.
At last, you understand who I am. Yes. Yes, I was born on one of these folk schools in Denmark, Ry Højskole, as it's called in Danish. And so my childhood and as a teenager, I grew up in this environment. And to understand the Danish culture and even the Scandinavian culture, you have to understand the folk schools, because in my opinion, it's like the secret DNA code of the Danish way of being, and how to understand why we have the society as we have today. And what is it that is so unique compared to a lot of other educational initiatives around the world? I think that that's the reason why I really like the folk schools, is that there's no exams. It's a very special period of young people's life when they're around 18, 19, 20 years old, 21 years old here in Denmark. They have the opportunity to attend a period of up to 3 months, maybe even 4 months, half a year, together with other young people. And the main focus is actually the living dialogue and the curiosity about both our historical past, but also what kind of future are approaching. It's a more than 150-year-old educational tradition here in Denmark, and it started out as a group of people, welcoming people in Jutland who thought at that time Denmark went through a transformation from being an agriculture country to industrial-based country, and there was a lot of young people in the countryside who, in a way, had a lot of time during the winter, that they spare time in the winter season that they could maybe use in a setting together with other young people to be enlightened, public enlightened. And maybe it sounds totally fluffy for people outside Denmark to understand what this is all about. But what you should imagine is a school where people lived during this period, and both lived and studied there together, and
really expanded their mind and their understanding of the world.
Yeah, exactly. And compared to most other educational institutions, we know there was no exams. This was the main purpose was to public enlightenment and try together with each other figure out how do we understand the world. And the consequence of that was that when you as a young person arrived to these schools, maybe you had a very fixed picture about how your future should look like. But because of this very inspiring environment, suddenly they saw all kinds of new possibilities. So it changed people's mindset, and it changed people's direction. And on top of that, it was a big It sounds not the right way to say a big dating dating show, but the people.
Well, that would be one of. I mean, what's wrong with that?
No, exactly. But people came from all parts of Denmark and spent 3 months together on these schools, and it really created a highly dynamic social mobility, because suddenly young people from different part of our country who normally wouldn't have met suddenly met each other, and out of that, of course, somebody fell in love and moved from one part of Denmark to the other part of Denmark. So it created it was really a very dynamic institution, both when it comes to education, but also to social mobility. And in a way, it took Denmark to the level where we are now, in my opinion.
I mean, you're absolutely right in my opinion, because I dug into this, and it's one of the similarities that I do see between the Kaospilots and the folk high schools is you get a lot. I don't know about the dating, getting a lot of young people in there and allowing them to explore what they're interested in, what they're really, caring about, and then creating a lot of energy. I've taught a couple of times. I've been a guest speaker at the Kaospilots in Aarhus. And that was before I researched and wrote the book, The Nordic Secret, about the folk high schools. And what I sensed from these young people was this energy and this enthusiasm and the hope and I want to go out and make a difference, which I guess was also what you wanted to create with the Kaospilots. And one of the sources that I read studying the history of the folk high schools was a Norwegian book from, I think, 1928 about a Norwegian pastor who had been to a folk high school when he was young. And he had met all these young people in Denmark who were, full of hope and energy and sparkles in their eyes. And they had all these dreams and hopes and want to go out and change the world or Denmark through starting their own farm and doing it better than their parents had done. And I kind of made that connection to the Kaospilots when I learned that you had your background in the folk high schools, because I saw some of the same things, but I also saw the thing that has sort of bothered me about the Denmark and the folk high schools, and was what was the thing that kind of rubbed me the wrong way with the Kaospilots, which is, and I'm going to take a naughty word into my mouth, which is the amateurism. The anything goes, the whatever you want to do, you can do. And sometimes it's like, yeah, but shouldn't you learn, a little bit of math first, or some of the skills that other people have built up over the years before you throw yourself out into it. So that was a long question, but it was a question.
Yeah. I really don't know how much actually you know about the Kaospilots, but for the audience who's listening to this dialogue we have, it's a 3-year long education in Aarhus, and the focus is on leadership and organization development, and of course entrepreneurship. And what is, in my opinion, is very unique about the education is the understanding that professional development and personal development goes hand in hand. Most academic institution, as I've been involved in, has of course a strong focus on what the term I would use is professional qualification. Means that if you attend education for nurses or teachers, or as a policeman or an architect or engineer, of course there are you have to, of course, to stand on some solid professional qualifications about the skills needed in the role you are educating yourself to, which is also the case at the Kaospilots. Because our focus, and of course I haven't been the principal for many years now, so I can't say exactly how the program looks today. But when I was the principal. Our professional qualification focus was on project design, process design, and business design. But what we learned, but also what our ambition was that, and our understanding was that professional qualification is not enough today. You have to train some more broader competence, as we called it. So we made a very distinct difference between professional qualification and broader social competence. And we identified 4 competence areas that we trained our students in. One was meaning competence. So how good are you to create meaning around yourself and your work? And that's especially important if you want to train yourself in leadership skills, because if you as a leader can't describe the meaning to the people you are working together with, then their motivation, of course, goes down. So if you can't understand the meaning, your motivation goes down. Then the second competence area was what we called at that time relationship competence. The way your skills in how to work together with the people you are on a team with, how to communicate clear, how to solve conflicts, how to create sustainable relationships in the organization you're part of. The third competence arena, so to speak, was change competence. So how do you react when the world is changing and the way you thought the world was, then it is actually something else? How do you deal with complexity, etc.? The last competence area was action competence. So how could you go from, how good are you to go from idea to reality? And that's, of course, the whole stuff around entrepreneurship and organizing. So to sum it up in a very black and white way, you could say that normally you get hired by your professional qualifications. So from which school are you educated, in which topic are you educated, etc. But you're fired by lack of the 4 competence areas. So if you can't create meaning around yourself, if you can't be a good colleague, if you can't change with what is happening in the world, and if you can't produce visual solid results, it doesn't work. So this very, in my opinion, very motivating learning environment as the Kaospilot program is. We really understand this complexity or dilemma or dynamic between professional competence and personal competence, professional qualification and personal competence, and that professional development and personal development, in my opinion, goes hand in hand. That was a very long description, but I can just say that check out the website, the Kaospilot website, and then you get a much better picture of what is happening right now.
Right. Your background is as a social worker, or at least that was what you were trained as, and you also studied journalism. And one of the things that I have always, whenever I heard you speak in public in Denmark, you brought in all these fresh ideas, and you came up with all these, the Kaospilots, front runners, all these cool expressions and so forth. It has an appeal. There is this emotional connection to the way that you use words, and I really like that. But I never heard you refer to that professional background, and I think that was also, that was part of what got me doubting what you were doing. Did you actually use that professional knowledge, what you learned in school, or did it just come out of, you know, your imagination and you happened to hit the right thing? And I don't know, maybe there have been attempts that we did not hear about. So the first, second, and third attempt just disappeared, and then by the later attempts, it ended up being something we heard about.
No, but what is interesting in my from my perspective about the Kaospilot is how this program actually from where did this program actually came from. Normally, when you start a new educational institution in Denmark, it grows out of already existing academic environment. There's very few examples of new higher educational institutions who has been created by from its own purpose and completely outside the traditional academic environment. And that was the case with the Kaospilots. So, Lene, when you said, hey, is this just a guy coming up with some smart taglines, and suddenly it's a higher educational institution in Denmark, I can tell you no. It grew out of more than 10 years of project work, cultural project work in Aarhus in Denmark. And you can't understand the Kaospilot without understanding from where did it actually came and how did it came. So to understand the vitality and the cultural dynamics and also the content and the way we organized the education, we had to go back to the front runners. And the front runners was an extremely entrepreneurial environment in Aarhus in Denmark. In the beginning, it was only one project by another, but around the end of the 80s, it was a kind of a network of different project initiatives, and the umbrella was called the front runners. And the last big project I was involved in was something called Next Stop Soviet Union. And again, for most people, that's maybe an unknown name and unknown project, but it was one of the most exciting and complex projects I had ever been involved in. And if we have time for it, I hope that we have time for it. I'll just tell the story so people really understand from what did the Kaospilot grew out of. So I have to take you all back to the spring of '88. So where were you in '88? I was sitting at the front runner's small office in the backyard in Aarhus in Denmark. And then there was a knock on the door, and I said, please come in. And in entered a very beautiful young red-haired woman, and she looked at us. We were sitting 3 young men around the table, and she looked at us, and she said with a very sharp Copenhagen accent, so what's up? And we said, what? And then and of course we asked her, what are you up for? and out of this dialogue, she described the project in Copenhagen, where a group of maybe 15, 20 young people in Copenhagen has got this completely out of this world reality project that they wanted to invade Soviet Union the next year in the fall of '89. And you have to understand that Gorbachev was just dead now, but at that time he was just the upcoming star in the Communist Party in the Soviet Union, and talked about glasnost and glasnost and what is it?
Glasnost.
Yeah, whatever. But he really wanted to change the Soviet Union, but Perestroika, that was the name of the word. And these kids in Copenhagen have got this ambition that they wanted to send in across the border with more than 2,000 young people and move up to Moscow and then organize a rock concert on the Red Square in front of Kremlin. Just take that ambition in. It's completely.
That does sound quite crazy. So you were just the right guy to contact.
You still had the Berlin Wall. You still had the Iron Curtain down Europe, and that project was in a lease of its own. So we just had to say yes. Of course, the first thing we asked this woman was, "Are you allowed to do that?" And she said, "No, but we'll figure a way." And then the second question was, do you have money for it? Because this is going to cost a lot of money. Just imagine to get 2,000 young kids to Moscow, where to stay, buses, security, etc., building up the stage on the Red Square, security, lighting, sounding, get rock musicians flying in from Copenhagen. It was an enormous project. And in a way, it sounded completely mission impossible, which in a way, of course, it was. But we thought it was so fascinating. So we accepted the task, and we worked for day and night the next 1.5 years. And in September '89, we moved towards Moscow. Big caravan up through Sweden and Finland and in through St. Petersburg and all the way to Moscow and the other way around from Germany, Poland, and all the way up to Moscow. And a few weeks before the event had to take place, the city council in Moscow decided to move the concert in front from the Red Square to in front of the Moscow University. But it hadn't happened. And in a way, seen now back, we were part of what became the big transformation. We were a small part of what was happening in Soviet Union, because 1 month later the Berlin Wall came down. Long story to come to the conclusion. When we arrived back to Aarhus, we asked ourselves, what kind of education should we have had to organize an event like this? Because at the university, no one has trained us to make a contract with the KGB. At the university, no one has trained us to make conflict solving with the Russian mob. At the university, no one has trained us to fundraise a couple of millions of Danish kroner that the project cost, whatever. So we said to ourselves, where on the planet Earth does that kind of education exist? And we did a lot of research, and we found pieces there and here, but not the exact concept that we wanted to create. And because it didn't exist, we said that we had to create an education that train young people to this very complex future that is heading towards us, and give them the skills to figure out how to navigate through turbulence, economic turbulence, cultural turbulence, social turbulence, and actually be able to land the plane safely on the other side, so to speak. So the reason, to go back to your question, Lene, that we were so much, in a way, formed by and colored by our learning by doing principle, and that has a huge impact on the program and the concept of the program. That if we have a more theoretical session, then the practical session should be equal. So theory and practice should be equal, and also there should be a balance between individual focus and team focus, and there should be a good balance between content and format, and a good balance between local understanding and global understanding, etc. So the reason why we were born out of this cultural, youth cultural environment, and with a very practical approach, and at the same time a very ambitious approach. The Kaospilot got the concept as it still has.
Was it a 3-year education from the beginning, or?
The ambition was 3 years, but the first team was only, I think, 2.5 years, because we didn't have money to have a 3-year program at that time. But it's a 3-year program today, and today it's part of the Aarhus University.
Right. So it's I mean, so can you apply to study there along with the other applications after high school, or is it separate? And how is it funded today? Do you get the same?
It's in a way you could compare it with, if you want to go into one of the other elite educational institutions in Denmark, like the film school or the theater school, the dance program, whatever, where a lot of people apply, but only a few gets through the neat hole. And that's the same with the Kaospilots. That there's a very ambitious intake process where people go through different phases before you either get in or not. So there's before you even can apply, or not before you can apply, but part of the application process is that you have to fill out a lot of questions, questionnaire, and on top of that, actually also answer a concept paper. Out of that, the school invites around 120 applicants, and then there's a workshop over 3 days where people are split up in smaller teams and get different kind of tasks, and there's a deep personal interview, and there are improvisation training, etc., to figure out what kind of team would we like to pick. They pick around, I think, 30 students each year, and so it's not only by grades you get in. It's much more personal and much more practical approach, and they try to create the team that has from the start has a dynamic that we know that they will get into conflicts. So
they will be disagreeing for 3 years.
Yeah, exactly. Because they have to be their own material, how to solve conflicts and how to make solutions and decisions and create results. So the content or the dynamic of the team is part of the program.
And so a lot of young people actually already have a bachelor's degree or something like that before they start, is my impression. Or
I think again, it's 15 years since I've been working there. I have my daily life there, so you have to check out the website to figure out if I'm completely.
We'll go to the website afterwards. No problem.
Yeah. But I think that first of all, again, you have to be at least 21 years before you apply, which means that the program really attracts older students. So I think maybe the medium age is around 24 or 25 before you get in, which also means that a lot of the people attending already has a bachelor degree before they enter.
So let's go to the alternative, because that is the one thing that I get. I keep getting questions about from people, and I meet people in Sweden. I've met people from Italy who have either started a party like it or something similar. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about how you started the party, because that was really the first thing that was very different and alternative. And it was one of the things where I also was a little bit critical about what you were doing. So let's hear your version of it first.
It's good to be critical. I have no problem with people who is critical. But then we just have to figure out: is that an assumption or is it a reality? Is it fact or is it just an assumption? Anyway, I started the alternative back in 2013, and I have to say that I'm not a member anymore. Actually, I really like the party in the phase they are right now, but there was some really a period with a lot of conflicts and troubles, internal troubles that at the end had the consequence that I left the party, even if I'm the founder. So there's for sure a learning in that as well, and I could write a whole book about it, but that's
Maybe they
not
need
the
you need a chaos pilot or something, but
yeah,
yes,
exactly.
you're not.
Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, we all have dramas and personal dramas. So we all take our dramas with us into the organization we're part of, and we're just human beings, and we make mistakes, etc., and we just have to learn from it. I'm quite cool about that. Anyway, to understand why I created the alternative, I have to tell you that at that time in 2013, I have just stepped down as Minister of Culture and had really, in the hard way, learned how politics works when it's most dark. As I said in the beginning of this interview, I've been a public elected politician for nearly 20 years on local level and national level. So, and I've had nearly all the roles and tasks you can imagine as a politician. And normally when I describe, especially politics on a national level as a member of the parliament, it really has a light side, but it also has a dark side. On a good day, I could tell all the good stuff about being a public elected person. On a bad day, I could really tell this is the most toxic environment you can imagine. And it was a very toxic environment for me during my time as a Minister for Culture. And at the end of the day, I decided to step down and really was in doubt if I should stay in politics, but decided that actually that the conflicts I went through as Minister for Culture, a big, huge public drama, media drama, in a way it was life wanted to train me to something better. And I just had my conclusion after going through this big media drama was that it can't be true that politics are so dark as it is. And something that should be maybe the most interesting arena of all, where you talk about how to create the best society and how to develop our society and how to work together, etc., etc. It must be much more inspiring and interesting than the version we have today. And so parallel with all that kind of a reflection, I also had a lot of thoughts about what is the biggest challenging we are facing as a society. And out of this discussion with myself and with people around me, I identified three major challenges that if you should create a new political party or platform, as we called it, we have to come up with good answers on these three specific challenges. And the first and foremost was, of course, the climate collapse, climate crisis. The second was what I call the empathy crisis, that our capability to feel the other and to understand the other was weakened enormously during these years, and in a way, I saw that part of the empathy crisis was also a crisis of meaning. So climate crisis, empathy crisis, and the last thing crisis was a system crisis. That the way we have organized our society didn't fit with where the world was heading. So I said, I'll try to see if there's an echo out there in Denmark, and they presented the alternative in November 2013 at a press meeting in the parliament. And what was a big surprise for most journalists at that time, and also political colleagues, was that we didn't came out in the beginning with a full described political program. We came out with 6 distinctive values we stood on, and of course a political manifesto. But the whole idea behind the alternative was that we wanted to invite the citizens into the process of formulating our political program. So the next year we organized a lot of different events, which we call political laboratories around Denmark, and invited people in to be part of the process to write our political program. And that succeeded in May 2014, where we voted for a political program. I think it was nearly, I can't remember, 200 pages. It was an enormous program. Anyway, and then in the election in 2015, we got nearly 50% of all votes in Denmark, and was maybe the third or second biggest party in the major cities. So it was a big surprise for everyone that we came in with this as the first party in Denmark who had the climate crisis as number one challenge we had to face. And if we don't handle the climate crisis, all our other problems, it doesn't matter. We don't have a planet to live on. Then so what else have we?
Denmark doesn't actually have, I mean, now we do, but we did not have a Green Party, which is, I guess, a little bit unusual for Europe. But you did go in and take that spot, so to say. One thing that, because at some point I did actually read a lot of your political program, because it was a long, it took a while to read, and even to get, not read all of it, but as much as I did. So let me put it that way. And one thing that stood out to me was that there were a lot of, and this is where my critical thing comes in. So there were a lot of great energy, and you could really sense that in the Danish public sphere. And whenever people were writing about the alternative, or people were speaking on behalf of the alternative, there was all this energy, and there was all this, finally somebody can do something about politics, and let's do it in a different way. But then when I read your party program, I happen to know at least one of the people who were involved in writing the environmental policy, and it was obvious there was somebody who knew what he was writing about. Then there was something about the public schools, and it was obvious that it was somebody who did not know very much about education who had written that. So the quality of the party program, or at least the part of the school policy that I read about, was very uneven. And that was one of my worries about the alternative. I've also read the other political parties' programs, and I won't say they did a better job. So you're not up against hard competition. But I did sense from what came out of your process a very uneven and perhaps directionless impetus, core, overall results. And so I wonder how will you quality assessing or testing what can go into our official program and what has to be left out?
One, in a way, you pinpoint some of the very important problems we had at the alternative while I was there, because in the contract between both the member base but also ordinary citizens who just wanted to be part of these political laboratories, the contract between the political party, us in the parliament, and the people involved in the political laboratories was not clear enough, because when people came to these laboratories, they thought that that whatever they came up with would end up in the final paper. Of course, we had all kinds of thoughts about how can we qualify the input. So we had a very distinct filters, quality filters that the ideas and suggestions had to go through. But it was actually it was a difficult task both to invite everyone to get into the process, at the same time secure enough quality level in the outcome. And there was a lot of learning in how to deal with in a way we did in a small on a small level. We did, the format was like a citizens assembly, and the citizens assembly is a well used method around the European countries, both on city level and national level and even the European level. But it takes a lot of resources into how to secure the process and also to secure the quality of the outcome. And that was some of the issues that was in play here. So some of the outcome was really on a very, very high level, and some outcome was not. Still, I think compared to, you mentioned the other parties, I think actually our outcome was very good. Anyway, then you can disagree with it, but I think overall the quality was really good. And if anyone wants to look into some of the papers, that I really think that this is a world-class political work, was we did a paper called the Three Bottom Line paper about a completely new way of understanding economy and how to measure the development of a nation's well-being. And it's on the Alternatives website. There's an English version of the paper.
And we will share the link under the video.
I think that was an extremely inspiring paper to write. It was a tough paper to write, and but I'm really proud of it. It completely set a new standard of what kind of material can a political party actually produce.
Cool. So when other people have started in other countries alternatives, or in Sweden is called the initiative, have they copied your program or your process, or both?
I think they copied both, but again, it's very context dependent how to create a new political party. For example, people should also check out Alternative UK, because they have done it very differently from the Danish version, of obvious reasons. Because in UK they have the first past the poll system, so it's extremely difficult for new parties to have a chance to get on the ballot. And to get members into the parliament. For example, the Green Party in UK have only one parliament member in the English Parliament, and if they had a representative model in the UK. The Green Party in England I think they would have 20 members in Parliament, but they have only one. So depending on what kind of political system you have, it's different version of the alternative model from which we use here in Denmark.
So how much contact do you have between the different parties now?
Yeah, of course, it's again, as I said with the Kaospilots, it's some years since I've been directly involved in it. It's the same case with the alternative. But me personally, I have a very good contact with what they're doing in UK, and because what they have done, which has inspired me, is that they're building the platform up from the bottom. So it's really rooted in local communities where we here in Denmark started from the top in the parliament and went down. In UK, they're starting from the bottom and going up. I think that where they are now in the UK is that their ambition is no longer to run for election on the national election. What they want to create is actually a global platform and figure out how can we create a global political platform where all these kind of initiatives actually can meet and discuss and involve. So it's quite fascinating what they're doing in the UK right now.
I mean, they do also have the language for it. I mean, the rest of us, we have to switch to their language to have this, whatever it is we do here, to get it outside the little bubble of
exactly.
5.6 million people. So we actually do have a very good lab, because nobody knows what we're doing if we just go about it in Danish.
That's true. Yeah.
I mean, I wrote all these books in Danish where I made my major mistakes. Now I hopefully only make smaller mistakes. So yeah, that's it's the petri dish. So you said you are leaving politics, or at least parliamentary politics for now. You never know when politicians retire, whether they mean it or they come back. So what are your plans? I mean, there's a whole future lying ahead of us, and we need to do something about it. Do you still have things up your sleeve that you will involve people in, or do you plan to, I don't know, grow a garden or something?
What is special for me right now is that for the first time in the last 40 years, I'm not a leader. I'm not responsible for a collective or a larger organization. Since I've been 25 years old, I've always been in charge and for a group of people's work, and so that's a really new place for me to be in. That I'm only speaking on behalf of myself, and I so much enjoy it, and I'm really looking forward to be a completely free man and just be me. As older citizens who can be grumpy and
the senior citizen now, is that where you're going?
I'm just a citizen now, a grumpy old citizen. What I'm out for right now, I don't know. I wrote my memoirs just half a year ago, and that was part of my process to step down from the national scene and secure that when I'm leaving Parliament, I have a totally whiteboard in front of me. That I don't know what will happen, and it's like it's a fantastic opportunity to. Maybe I just want to sit in my backyard under my apple tree. Maybe I'll make a movie. I don't know. And I don't care.
A political party and an education or something.
I don't want to. I'm finished with political work on that level. I'm not saying that I'm finished with political work as so, because I'm always been a politically engaged person. But what where that will take me from there, I don't know. I've just started to write a new book, which actually came as a surprise for me that I had the energy to start to write again so soon after writing a big memoir. And the reason why I started on this book project was I got a question from an old mentor in the US, Mr. D. Hawk, the founder of Visa Card, and he gave me a question that I couldn't answer because I was in doubt, and I don't want to go too much into detail with what the question was, but it was, of course, about is there any hope anymore in the world? And normally I'm a very happy guy and always think that we'll find a way. Where there's a will, there's a way. But I couldn't answer him directly on the question. And that threw me out into a lot of doubts about what is happening and what we should do in the situation we are in. And on that energy, I'm writing. So I don't know if it's going to be a very dark book, or I hope, of course, there's a happy ending. But right now, I don't know. I'm in doubt.
It sounds like we should do another conversation. Some months from now, when you're further into it. Hopefully, when you find the answer, please come back.
Exactly. So in a way, the book is my answer to the question. Unfortunately, he died 2 months after he asked me the question. So, of course, the book is dedicated to D. Hawk, and this is my answer to him on the question.
Wow. So I will be looking forward to that, definitely.
Yeah,
and,
if I'm able to write it, Yeah. Right now I'm in doubt.
Yeah. Wow. See, you know what? We tend to forget all the value that the senior citizens can bring to all of us. So now we're like, hey, Uffe Elbæk, you're now one of the wise elders of society. Please provide us with some hope and guidance. So
exactly.
So, let's see how it goes. This has been such a pleasure. I'm really happy that you wanted to come here and tell about your work and your thoughts behind it and your background. I really enjoyed it. I hope you did too.
I did. And thanks for the invitation.